can get back to the original disciples and what they were proclaiming. That Jesus died for our sins, that he was buried, that he was raised, that he appeared, and it was a physical bodily resurrection.
I'm not an agnostic, I'm a Christian, but my concern is when I look at this, if I was taking the steps that Mike takes in his book, such as an explanation for it to be valuable historically has to be less ad hoc, explanatory scope, has to go with what we already know, have more illuminating power. If I was an agnostic and I was unsure about God, but said, this Jesus fellow seems to have something to do with God if he's there, and I want to study him, it looks to me like the multiplicity of sources are unanimous that Jesus died, and that if he wasn't raised, at least his followers believe he was raised from the dead. And it looks to me like the Islamic interpretation is very ad hoc and trying to deny this based on one source 600 years later. So if I was someone coming at this theory from the outside, I'm curious, why should I believe the source 600 years later instead of the multiplicity of sources that I have so close to the event?
Okay, so to me, the position I've outlined actually has greater explanatory scope because it explains the development of the Gospels over time, how the stories evolved and changed, and it has great explanatory power in that when we look at the whole situation regarding Jesus, it takes into account everything that we know, and even from modern science. Third, it is plausible in that if you think of the Christian story that you have a dead man and then he came back to life, then unless you have good evidence for a man coming back to life, you shouldn't assert that. But if we say that this man was somehow in a sleep or in a coma, and then he came back to life, well, this happens even in our day, so it doesn't require a great stretch. This is entirely plausible. Third, it is not ad hoc in that it takes into consideration the actual materials that were there. It actually builds upon all of the evidence that's available. For example, Mike mentioned Josephus, who was an independent Jewish source, but in Josephus' reconstructed statement as found in Mike's book, it says that Jesus was crucified. It doesn't say that Jesus actually died. So he was crucified, and then he was seen alive again. Well, that's the Muslim position that I have outlined in my speech. He was crucified, but not killed on the cross. So in one interpretation, yes, he was crucified. In another, he was not, because he did not die. And then he was seen again. The Christian story is tripartite. He was crucified, then he appeared resurrected, like he was put in the tomb dead, and then came back and lived among his disciples for a time, and then he was ascended into heaven. The idea that he gone from crucifixion all the way up into heaven, this double two-part story is what the Quran says. They did not kill him nor crucify him, but God raised him to himself. It's two parts. Christian story, three parts. So to me, this is entirely illuminating as well, because it helps us to understand the development of the Christian story.
Well, I would say Shabir appeals to Josephus that he was crucified, but it doesn't mean he died. Well, obviously, Josephus thought that Jesus died. All right? He's not a Christian. He's a Jewish guy. And you don't walk away from crucifixions. All right? So Josephus certainly thought Jesus had died. He talks about evolution, how the Gospels evolved and changed. Yet all of them, we could discuss that. I'd be happy to discuss that. But all of them clearly, unquestionably mention Jesus' death and resurrection. And that's what we're talking about here. And we can get back to the original disciples and what they were proclaiming. That Jesus died for our sins, that he was buried, that he was raised, that he appeared, and it was a physical bodily resurrection.